remind our friends about your organization and your website and an event you have coming up here, not far from where I'm sitting right now in Chicago toward the end of the month.
Yeah, our website is, of course, we're the Conservative Caucus. We're the nation's oldest conservative grassroots organization, founded in 1974. You can find out about that history and what we're doing now at theconservativecaucus.org. And you'll see right at the top there an event we have in Chicago, as you mentioned. We're going to have Rod Blagojevich speaking there, George Papadopoulos, and some local people who've been fighting the transgender issue, and some school boards that have been doing some crazy stuff. So got a lot of great people in Chicago we're going to meet. It's filling up fast, so you'll want to get some tickets right away at theconservativecaucus.org. Just click on the banner there and you can figure out how to register.
Excellent, excellent. Well, we got some clips to play and comment on. One of them, I got a couple clips actually related to RFK Jr. He had a very busy day today. Listen to these stats, folks. He revealed that autism rates for boys in America is now 1 in 20. Wait a minute. I thought we were 1 in 36 a few months ago. Then a few weeks ago, it was 1 in 31. Now a new study says it's 1 in 20. In California, it's 1 in 12.5 boys. What is going on in California? Listen to what RFK Jr. had to say today.
So Americans can understand what is happening with chronic disease in this country in real time and not have to wait 2 years to react. We don't wait 2 years to react to a measles epidemic, and we should not, or any kind of infectious disease. We shouldn't have to do that for diabetes or autism. The ASD prevalence rate in 8-year-olds is now 1 in 31. Shocking. There's an extreme risk for boys. Overall, the risk for boys of getting an autism diagnosis in this country is now 1 in 20. And as high in California, which has the best data collection. So it probably also reflects the national trend, 1 in 12.5 boys. This is part of an unrelenting upward trend. The prevalence 2 years ago was 1 in 36. Since the first ADDM report in 1990, which was 1992 births, autism has increased by a factor of 4.8. That's 480%, I believe. The first ADDM survey was 22 years ago, when prevalence was 1 in 150 children. In all the core states, the trend is consistently upward, and most cases now are severe. So about 25% of the kids who are diagnosed with autism are nonverbal, non-toilet trained, and have other stereotypical features, head banging, tactile and light sensitivities, stimming, toe walking, etc.
Wow, Jim, this is really sad, isn't it?
It's incredibly sad. I know for when I was still in child raising years, had at least 3 families that I knew that had autistic children. And in every case, it happened shortly after they received a vaccination. Now, I'm not trying to say that that's the only reason. The point I'm trying to make is this has been an emerging problem for some time. And there have been people who have said there's evidence of that related to vaccinations, but there can be environmental factors that are there too. You know, I've been reading up a lot on keto diets. A lot of people don't understand that keto diets were developed to deal with Parkinson's and autism, and actually have some positive benefits because the brain stops feeding off of the sugars and starts feeding off of ketones, which is a better fuel for the brain. So there's a lot of great information out there that let's say the science industrial complex hasn't wanted people to know. I'm very glad that RFK is at HHS and is going to put a new way of thinking on this. This doesn't mean that he's always right. It doesn't mean a lot of these other things are always right. What it means is that we may have a chance to actually look at things for what they are. But as to autism, to look at these numbers, it's breathtaking. I mean, think about that. 1 in 12 and a half boys in California develop autism. That's amazing. I mean, that's just showing up in your church. And that could be half a dozen or more, depending on the size of your church. That's breathtaking. This is a very, very serious issue. There are environmental factors and other factors that we need to deal with. And I'm glad he's shedding some light on it, because this has got to get solved somehow.
Absolutely. I don't know if I can find it. Maybe you can help me find it, Logan. But I did read today where it was mentioned that the hepatitis B shot, I think that's the shot that the kids get shortly after they're born. Now, my wife and I refused that shot when all 3 of our children were born, because we knew that there was no reason to give that. In fact, here it is. RFK Jr. exposes alleged 1999 CDC study claiming hepatitis B vaccine given at birth or within 60 days raised autism rates by 1,135% compared to unvaccinated kids. Relative risk dwarfs smoking lung cancer link. Let me just play this, because this whole thing, by the way, of the hepatitis B, it doesn't last very long. And it's supposedly in case your child comes in contact with blood, or it becomes a drug user using needles. But the shot only has like a shelf life of like 7 years, right? So how many kids are going to be involved in prostitution and handling blood and abusing drugs with needles to get hepatitis B? So this whole thing is a scam from the beginning. But now we find out it's tied to autism. Watch this.
Who got it on the day of birth to children who got it within the first 60 days of life, comparing it to children who didn't get it. And they were looking at the health outcomes. And what they found was that children who got that vaccine had an 1,135% greater chance of having a autism diagnosis than kids who didn't get it. And they knew...
Sorry, 1,100%.
1,135%. So it's called a relative risk of 1,135. Just for comparison, the relative risk between smoking a pack of cigarettes a day for 20 years and getting lung cancer is 10. And that's causation. So they knew in 1999 what was causing the autism epidemic, and they had an emergency meeting when they got this study back. And they didn't do it on the CDC campus because they thought then they would have to give it to the public in the Freedom of Information law, and they wanted to keep it a secret. So they had a secret meeting at a retreat center in Norcross, Georgia, called the Simpsonwood Retreat Center, and they invited the heads of all the vaccine companies. There were 75 people at that meeting, all the regulators from the World Health Organization, the CDC, FDA, NIH. They all got together for 2 days, and they looked at this study, and they agreed to keep the study secret. But during that 2-day period, they spent the first day talking about the study and agreeing among themselves that it was true that they were destroying all these children. And they say these horrific things, like one of the leaders of the regulatory community says, my grandson was born this morning and I'm not going to get him vaccinated.
Lovely.
And then they spend the next day talking about how to keep this from the American public, how to hide it from the press, from lawyers, they're terrified of the lawyers. And they were very scared that they themselves would have liability.
That's something. Jim?
Yeah, listen, I'm open to hearing the correlation causation argument, because just to say 1,135% are there, like, to me that speaks of causation. But I'm willing to hear someone show me actual science that relates to what's there. And of course, RFK specifically talked about a meeting of world health leaders trying to apparently hide all this. And we've learned after the COVID situation, they'll hide anything. They won't let you know what's going on. And my big problem here, and what's at the core of this issue, is the corporatism that seeps into these federal agencies. It's what we call regulatory capture. And this is where suddenly the government's not really the regulatory body. They're working with outside major interests to regulate in such a manner that protects or expands the business of those large corporate interests. And I'm not against large corporations. What I'm saying is we've got a problem in the federal government where regulatory capture does happen. And it seems to me that in vaccinations, this is one of those instances. I mean, just look at this case. I don't know if you have queued it up in any way, but this case in Massachusetts that's just happened. There was a couple who had a 9-month-old baby. They didn't, for religious reasons, want to give a vaccination to them. And they got reported by their doctor, and then they got charged with a felony kidnapping case because they decided to move to Texas because they didn't want to deal with the Massachusetts regulators. It's crazy what these people are doing to families.
Yep. Here's the article. We dealt with it tonight on our Worldv report. Massachusetts took custody of 5 children after doctor reported parents for not vaccinating baby. 9 months old. They didn't want their baby to get it. They claimed the religious exemption, which they have in Massachusetts. I think this doctor should lose his medical license. That's my opinion. He should never be allowed to practice. And I think this couple ought to bring a multi-million-dollar lawsuit against him and his practice, because I read tonight that on the Worldv report that their attorney is saying that there was no cause, that there is a religious exemption in Massachusetts. So what is the cause for filing a complaint by this pediatrician? We have interviewed pediatricians that tell us that, and we played a clip of a pediatrician saying that vaccinations like this, childhood vaccinations, bring in about $1 million a year into a pediatric clinic. So I think it's about money. And I'm told that some of these pediatricians, they can't make it supposedly if they don't get that $1 million a year. So it comes down to the bottom line, not the child, right?
Yeah, and we do have a healthcare industrial complex, by the way. I mean, we know for a fact that not only are vaccine producers immune from being civilly liable to all this stuff, that we do know for a fact that they're skirting, and we saw this in COVID with the COVID vaccines. They're skirting the testing that shows whether there's effectiveness and safety with these things. So they bypass all that. But the fundamental foundation of any society that is free is that the citizens maintain their rights, and that includes parental rights. There's an interesting little passage in the second treatise of government by John Locke where he delves into the concept that all government really starts in the family. It starts with the husband and wife and their relationship, and then their relationship to their children. That's kind of a mini government. And he makes the point that when governments are created amongst men, that you cede some of your rights so that the government can protect in a more broad sense. But we've gone way beyond that in Western culture. We're literally into the socialist vein where you've got government bureaucrats and actors literally determining life decisions for its citizens. And in the case of parents should be making these decisions. And yes, you want them to have the best information possible and to act on that as best possible, but that's still their responsibility. And if they make a bad decision, then they make a bad decision. Make the information better. There is one last thing here on this. We've talked a lot in recent years with criminal justice reform about qualified immunity for police officers and whether they should have that or not. Qualified immunity means that you really can't go after them civilly in certain cases, and people have wanted to take that away. And I actually think that that's an appropriate debate to have. But what I really want beyond that is get rid of qualified immunity that exists for bureaucrats. Bureaucrats make bad decisions, they do bad things, and then that causes harm to us. They ought to be civilly liable as well if they act in bad faith. And these people in Massachusetts acted in bad faith. There's certainly a lot of child services people who really do care and are trying to fix bad problems. And I don't want to demean them. But there is a wave in that area that's been developing over the last 20, 30 years that is a radical leftist view of parental rights, and they try to undermine it constantly. And this Massachusetts case is really what would have been propagated widely if Kamala Harris had been elected, and that they were trying to propagate even over these last 4 years. It's a dangerous thing, and we need to push back on it.
Well said. I like what you said related to family, and that family is really the incubator for government.
Yeah.
You go read Frederick Bastiat's book, The Law, and government is literally just a collection of individuals coming together collectively to defend individual rights. And I like how you stated that, and it made me think of Genesis chapter 9, and I went and looked it up here. I'll show it here on the screen, because when I was studying this a few years ago, I stumbled on this and I thought, wow, this is a powerful text. Noah and his family in chapter 8 of Genesis have just come off the ark after the worldwide flood. And we know that the chapter breaks are not ordained. They're not divine. They're not supernatural. They're given by man, the chapter breaks and the verses, to make it easier to find scriptures. So this really flows from Genesis 8 into Genesis 9, and they've just come off the ark. And look what it says. It tells them, then God blessed Noah and his sons, saying to them, be fruitful, increase in the number, and fill the earth. The fear and dread of you will fall on the beasts of the earth and all the birds of the sky, on every creature that moves along the ground and all the fish in the sea. They are given into your hands. Everything that lives and moves will be food for you. Just as I gave you the green plants, now give you everything. I now give you everything. But you must not eat meat that has its lifeblood still in it. And for your lifeblood, I will surely demand an accounting. I will demand an accounting for every animal, and from each human being too. I will demand an accounting for the life of another human being. Verse 6, whoever sheds human blood, by humans shall their blood be shed. For in the image of God has God made man. Okay, now this is very interesting, because here they are, they've just gotten off the ark. They're the only 8 people on the planet at this point. And the power of civil government is given by God to Noah and his family. The power of civil authority has been entrusted with the family. And I believe, of course, as you have the God ordained the family government, and then we see a civil government, and then we see church government in the book of Acts. 3 institutions God created there to work in harmony with each other, complementing each other. But notice the power of civil authority or capital punishment was not given to the church government, wasn't given to the civil government initially. It was given to the family members. If someone sheds blood, you have the right to take their life, capital punishment. Now over in Romans 13, we see that government exists for do what is good, and you better do what is right, because if you don't, the government has the power of the sword to put you to death, capital punishment. But the initial source of this authority was given to families, to individuals, which I think fits very well with our form of government, a constitutional republic, and that we believe governments are instituted among men. The template is there by God, but it's man that creates the government. And what man creates, man can alter, man can abolish. Our own organic documents say this. So isn't it interesting, Jim, that the power of civil authority comes first and foremost into the family, and then the families take what God gave them, and we collectively agree to form a government to carry out these functions as our agent on our behalf. And just as we can fire our insurance agent, we can fire our attorney, our accountant, who acts as an agent for us. Government is an agent for us. It's the doctrine of agency. But all of this really resides in us, given to us by God. And I don't think most Americans understand. They think of government as some super organic power structure that just has all this authority. It has zero authority other than what we give it, because all these rights have been given to us, including the right of self-defense and capital punishment, and we delegate it to government as we come together as individuals collectively to defend individual rights. These are tenets I know you know, but this is what everyone in our society should be taught in the schools, because I think today we bow down to government thinking somehow government is over us, when reality is, as you know, that God is over the people and the people are to be over the government.
Every teenager and every college student should be taught the principles of the Constitution from the text itself, not drawing in all of the jurisprudence, maybe a little bit, but not much. And they should be taught things like Montesquieu's Spirit of the Laws, and they should be taught John Locke's two treatises of government and Bastiat's The Law. And these principles are fundamental. The only purpose of government, as it was finally conceived in Western society beginning in the 18th century, was the idea of popular sovereignty. And the reason we wanted popular sovereignty was twofold. First of all, we wanted the people to ultimately keep their rights within themselves in their relationship to God, personally, and in families. The second reason for that is that by its very nature, that concept of popular sovereignty, by its very nature, limits government, if you follow the principle, to only undertaking efforts to protect rights and to help facilitate the activity of individuals, especially when it comes to their economic activity, as it relates, for example, to the fact that Congress was given the right to create post roads. Well, what was that purpose? Both to move the post office stuff around, but also to allow for commerce to proceed. And so just to facilitate the activities of individuals, not to collaborate those efforts or to direct those efforts. That is what the idea of popular sovereignty has always been about. We left that. We're in the back end of about 110 to 120 year progressive experiment that began during the Wilson administration, really began in the Teddy Roosevelt administration when we started seeing massive regulation, that has the concept and the idea that the Constitution's a little passe, and we're the modern world now, and we need to help direct societies to go to certain ends. And that's not the role of government. The role of government's not to direct societies to certain ends. This is really the principle of Romans 13, by the way, because governments are supposed to do good and to praise good and to deal with harm in a way to punish it. So this whole concept of popular sovereignty is really fundamental to Scripture. By the way, you didn't even talk about, and I know you know it, but 1 Samuel 8, when Israel said, "Give us a king," and God said that they were rejecting him, told Samuel they were rejecting him when they said they wanted a king, because his concept was more like what was happening in the Judges, which you would just have judges to adjudicate cases, good men who could be pulled off of those judicial stands that would just take a look honestly and fairly between disputes and deal with them. And then the rest of life was left to the individual and God. This is the best form of government. Not perfect, not without troubles and harms and risks, but those risks are far better than the ones that we have when we have a Federal Reserve jimmying around with our money and a federal government telling us how to live our lives. And even worse, in the case of what RFK's been talking about, a government that will demand that you take medical treatment that may cause you harm. This is absurd, and we've got to get away from this way of thinking in government.
Absolutely. Listen to what Pam Bondi came out and said today.
Today, the Department of Justice is announcing a civil lawsuit against the Maine Department of Education. The state of Maine is discriminating against women by failing to protect women in women's sports. Pretty basic stuff. This is a violation of Title IX. The Department of Justice will not sit by when women are discriminated against in sports. This is about sports. This is also about these young women's personal safety.
There you go.
Well, we have got an assault on reality. We're talking a lot about scripture and faith in Christ and God's law. You know, I say to every Christian, everyone of the Jewish faith, anyone that's a rational thinker, if your theology is messed up, your anthropology is entirely messed up. Your theology is what you know about God's actual nature and character, and your anthropology is what you understand about how mankind was created and his nature. And that requires an understanding of the differences between male and female, the complementary nature of male and female, the proper purpose and use of marriage in a society and how it builds up, and how mankind's basic sinful nature that exists and how we address that and work with that. What's happening with this trans issue that was beginning with redefinitions of marriage in the early part of this century and even into the 1990s, all these redefinitions are breaking down fundamental tenets of society that keep us strong and make life work and make societies grow and prosper moving into the future. I used to talk to a group of liberal Jewish kids that it was a great program. They were running them all across the country and exposing them to different ideas. They're mostly liberal kids, though. And the guy who ran it, who's a really dear friend of mine, is of the left. But we're really good friends. We respect one another. But I would always talk about marriage and family with these kids. We did this for like 16 years until the program ceased. And I would tell them that all the social science is out. I mean, it's out. We got about 60 plus years of social science, and it proves this one thing. In every range of marriage, great marriages to bad marriages, excluding rape, incest, and abuse, physical and sexual abuse of any kind. If you have bad to great marriages, kids always do better when they have a married mother and father in the home. It's a fundamental need in society. And we're going to have different ways of thinking, people of different stripes, and you're always going to have people that don't get married or they're homosexual or whatever. And that's just the way society happens. But if you do not honor marriage and you do not honor the place of men and women in society, the society breaks down over time. You need stable families with a married mother and father in the home.
Absolutely. Yep. It's just a matter of proven fact. Jim Pfaff, thank you. Thank you guys for watching. Take care.